Hello, good morning. You know, one of the responsibilities, one of the obligations of presidency of the United States is the civic ceremony. And moments like this, clearly President Trump embraces the civic ceremony, reminding the country about what can be achieved, what can happen when those ceremonies are observed and to a certain measure celebrated. And that's what President Trump did here in the Rose Garden, inviting members of the Supreme Court, members of the legislative branch, and of course, as the President of the United States, unifying all three branches of the American government, which live in opposition to each other at times, but also can find moments of harmony. Clearly, symbolically, today was a moment of harmony. And not only is new Justice Neil Gorsuch once a clerk of sitting Justice Anthony Kennedy, he was also a clerk of Byron White, who also served on the Supreme Court. And this is the first time we've had a ceremony here at the White House for a Supreme Court swearing in since Antonin Scalia was sworn in here at the White House in 1986. Before that, the first time it had ever happened at the White House, 1940, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt presided over and witnessed one of the Supreme Court justices being sworn in. And as was noted, Justice Gorsuch approaches this job, which what he said would be humility and as a servant of the law. And this is a crucial accomplishment, probably the most distinctive accomplishment for President Trump in his first 100 days. No repeal and replace of the Affordable Care Act, no visible progress yet on tax reform, legislative agenda not necessarily stalled but not moving with swift pace. But a Supreme Court justice nominated and confirmed is a signal accomplishment. And Anthony Kennedy's presence here is also significant in one other regard. As I'm sure Jan Crawford will make mention of momentarily, it is expected, though not predicted, that Judge Kennedy might be the next to retire from the Supreme Court, giving this president yet another opportunity to fill a vacancy on the Supreme Court. And as was clear from this battle over Neil Gorsuch, that will be a pitched political battle, but with the rules change in the Senate engineered by the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Democrats virtually powerless to stop this president from not only nominating, but seeing confirmed a replacement for any justice who may leave the court. Anthony Kennedy expected to be the one next in line. Vlad and Rick.
All right, Major Garrett at the White House for us. Thank you so much. Now we want to bring in a CBS News chief legal correspondent, Jan Crawford. She has been watching along from our Washington bureau. Jan, talk about what happens next. What cases should we be watching for in the immediate future?
Well, I mean, now Justice Gorsuch will get right to work. I mean, he'll sit in on the conference on Thursday where the justices will talk about upcoming cases that they may be adding to their docket, and then he'll be on the bench for the last 2 weeks that the court will hear arguments this term, the term ending, of course, in June. So he'll be able to cast votes in those cases where he's listening to the arguments in. And then any other cases that have already been argued but not yet decided, if those had divided the justices 4-4, they may decide to reschedule those for argument next term. There's a significant religion case coming up in the next week that he'll participate in, as separation of church and state case. But the cases this term are not that substantial, and I think that was deliberate. The justices kind of avoided major conflicts because they knew they only had a court of 8. And remember, that seat has been vacant now for 14 months since the sudden death of Justice Antonin Scalia. So I think what matters now, what's important to think about, is not really what's going to happen in the next couple weeks or this week, but what this means for the course of history. Because as President Trump pointed out, and as Major alluded to, this nomination, a Supreme Court nomination, is a president's most lasting legacy. What President Trump has done today is put a justice on the Supreme Court who's 49 years old. He's a solid conservative. He will be deciding cases that have an enormous impact on American life for a generation to come. Long after President Trump has left the White House, Justice Gorsuch will be on that Supreme Court. And President Trump, as Major pointed out, could well get another nomination or two in the next couple years. So he will again be able to make his mark on that court. Justice Gorsuch will not change the balance of the court. He's replacing the most conservative, or one of the most conservative justices on that Supreme Court. So it will keep its 5-4 narrow conservative majority. But the next justices to retire or leave the court could well mean that President Trump could move that court further to the right.
So, Jan, we saw Justice Kennedy administer the judicial oath to Justice Gorsuch earlier, and it is Justice Anthony Kennedy who's expected to leave the next vacancy on the court. He is 80 years old right now. Were you surprised that Democrats decided to filibuster Judge Gorsuch as opposed to waiting? Because as you pointed out just now, it won't really change the balance of the court because he is filling a conservative seat, and not wait until Justice Kennedy decided to take next steps for his career and his life.
Right, and yes, I mean, the short answer to your question is yes, and I think they may come to regret it, Vlad. I mean, if you think about Justice Kennedy, he was appointed by President Reagan, but he's a moderate conservative. He's someone that votes with liberals on social issues, providing a key vote on abortion rights, same-sex marriage, affirmative action. So he's, while considered a conservative, he's a moderate, and he definitely goes over to the left on those cases involving social issues. He wrote all the cases on gay rights, for example, and is something of a hero to the gay rights community. So if he steps down now, President Trump presumably will be replacing him with someone who's much more conservative, and Democrats are going to be powerless to stop it. If they had held off on this fight and waited and kept their powder dry and filibustered the next nomination, the American people would have probably been paying a lot more attention, because a lot more is going to be at stake with the next nomination. So, you know, was I surprised? Absolutely, and I actually think it was a strategic mistake.
Jan Crawford reporting for us in Washington. Jan, thank you very much.